Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered take straight off the cuff. And today I'm going to be talking about the latest game from Stunlock Studios called V Rising. So, chances are you've probably already heard of this game. It's been incredibly popular, I guess, after release, which is honestly, in my opinion, really good. Because the previous game from this developer wasn't super popular, or at least it fell off pretty hard after initial release. And I always thought it was actually a really great game. It was, I don't know if anyone knows it. It was um, like a top-down isometric PvP squad-based game, kind of in the vein. It was sort of like a MOBA, but without any of the grinding or leveling up or buying gear or anything like that. You just had a character with a set of abilities that you decided on, I guess, and you could change out. Each character had different, maybe a couple choices per ability slot, basically, and it was just an incredibly skill based 3v3 arena game. And you can everything controlled kind of like League of Legends, where you had your auto attack, you had a bunch of different abilities and ultimate, that kind of thing. But the thing with it is that, like I said, it was incredibly skill based, and because there was no grinding or leveling, you couldn't really gain any kind of statistical advantage. It was just all about squad composition and your ability to use your abilities, basically. So I always thought that game was really cool. If you don't know it, honestly, go check it out. I don't know if the servers are still going, but if it is, it's worth trying for sure. But this latest game has been a shit ton more successful, and it carries across a lot of those core elements, but it actually blends in a lot of different influences to make what is quite a unique game, in my opinion. So it continues with that kind of top-down, I guess you could say isometric kind of viewpoint, right? It's almost not like something like Diablo or Path of Exile, again, games like that. But it combines it with essentially the skill-based combat system of battle, right? So at the core, all of the abilities are still very similar. In fact, it carries across a couple of abilities that are identical. So the counter system in Battle Right I always thought was an incredibly unique aspect of it, and that's in this game as well. So the way counters in this game work, for example, is so you've got your little vampire dude and you're running around auto attacking people depending on what weapon you've got, and you're being attacked. And if you use your counter ability, which again you can switch out for any ability you unlock, but I'll explain how that works a bit later. If you use your counter ability, and what happens your character essentially goes into a 1.5 second window where they can't attack or cast spells. I think you can move. And the idea is that you're glowing in this state and you can't do anything, but if you get attacked, you get some benefit for it. So in Battle Right, there were, each character had different, loads of different types of counters. So some would just deal damage back, some would heal you, some would give you a free teleport. There were a bunch of different things. In this game, the first one you get just essentially knocks all the enemies back and gives you a heal, which is actually shockingly useful in this game, because as it's a skill-based PvE mostly game, the bosses in this game and a lot of the combat encounters in general get pretty tough. You have to be pretty good at using your abilities at the right time, managing your health, managing how much damage you take in. There's lots of AoE abilities, so positioning is really important, and all that kind of stuff. So all of the combat in this game is pretty stellar. It's got a decent chunk of unique ideas that have been shipped over. It's very skill based, like I said. And there's a decent variety too. The way this game essentially works is, because you don't have the characters of Battle Right, you essentially level up your character and take on tougher and tougher bosses over the course of the game. And whenever you beat a boss, generally they're going to unlock some type of structure and also some type of power or ability. So everyone's playing the same vampire, but you can load out your vampire with a huge array of different abilities from different schools of magic, alongside having, 5 or 6 different weapon options that all work pretty differently and have different abilities in and of themselves, right? So, for example, there's a spear, and one of its abilities is the ability to you throw it in a line, and if it hits anyone, you harpoon them back, so you can pull people towards you. There's a giant reaper, which is kind of I guess it's kind of like a scythe, but instead of having a giant blade on the end, it's more like an axe type thing. And that's got a bunch of AoE abilities where you can spin it, you can throw it in front of you and it spins and anything, and that will get damaged over time, and stuff like that. So, like I said, the combat, pretty deep, really cool. So the only other thing to really talk about is kind of like the meta structure of the game, I guess. So basically, the way the game works, again, it blends a lot of different influences. This isn't something you would expect for a game like this, I don't think, but I think it works really well. The structure of the game is essentially each person is at the start of the game you can pick a server, and each server can hold up to 50 people. That's like its maximum capacity, right? I would assume it's maximum capacity at any one time. I don't know if that's like max capacity for, like, only 50 people can ever log onto that server. Maybe that's the case. I'm honestly not 100% sure. And basically the idea is there's this predetermined map with loads and loads of locations. There's about 4 major zones, I think, with maybe like a couple extra small ones, and they're working on more because the game's in early access. So the map isn't like huge, but the idea is you go into the world and you build your vampire castle in a similar way to something like Valheim, where you just find a place in the land and you plop down your castle. And because there's 50 of you on the server, there's loads and if you go on a PvP server, you can raid each other's castles and stuff like that. But the general idea is you're going to be doing a bunch of harvesting, and through this harvesting, you'll be able to build your castle. You'll build more and more fancy kind of like workbenches, and from those workbenches, you can transfer your resources into a variety of different bits of gear and stuff like that. And that's also the way you level up. So when you go out and kill mobs, you never actually gain XP for any of it. The only thing you get is resources, and if you kill bosses, new abilities and new buildings, right? And basically the way it works is the only way you can level up is by going out farming materials and creating gear, and then you get a gear level, and your gear level is your level, just straight up. There's no like bloodlines or anything like that. Just if you have X amount of gear, you'll be at X level. And I gotta say, for me personally, I've never actually played a game like this. I've never played Diablo or any of those games either, even though from what I understand they're a bit more grindy, like you can level up your character through just killing enemies. I don't think it's like purely gear, although gear is important, kind of as in a similar way to World of Warcraft. But yeah, basically in this, it's like essentially just purely gear. But yeah, as this is my first time playing one of these games, I was kind of on the fence as to whether I was going to end up liking it, but I've ended up actually really quite loving it. I think it's a really, really solid game. There's so many just cool ideas that kind of work with the vampire theme. I love the fact that it's small PvP servers where you can essentially win a server, because, as you get towards the middle of the game, so I haven't like gotten to the end game yet, really. I'm about kind of towards like the mid-late point, I suppose. But there's actually objectives on PvP servers that only X number of people will ever be able to complete. So I think there's something called a soul shard. I don't know what it does, honestly, but having the soul, like, there's only one soul shard on the server, and having it gives you some kind of benefit, right? So getting the soul shard and holding on to it and being able to fend off vampires is kind of the equivalent of like winning the server, I suppose you could say. So that's a really cool element of the game, that like there's this huge kind of list of bosses you can do with a ton of progression, but it's also like very competitive in its nature. That's just a really interesting blend I don't really think I've seen much of. I'm sure it exists, like maybe this is kind of a little bit what like maybe early DayZ was and stuff like that, or Rust, I guess, because they do server resets too. But I've never really played anything like this. And yeah, honestly, like I said, it's a very polished game. The combat system from Battlerite works fucking beautifully on this. It means that there's a ton of potential to outplay people. There's a lot of different things you need to think about. There's a lot of preparation that goes into everything. Certain bosses will be easier to beat if you have certain abilities, because it just naturally counters them. You have to consider day-night cycles. Being a vampire will just burn up in the day. It makes certain bosses like a giant pain in the arse, and others like really aren't a problem. Like you can just, like if you go fight like a monster boss that's in a cave, then you're in the shade the whole time, it's fine. All the raiding seems really cool, though I haven't engaged with it a ton, but the general idea is you can kind of, you can build explosives to break down people's walls, and then you also have to actually take over an enemy castle, you have to like build a pretty expensive key, and that will only destroy it, and you have to actually build 3 of them to be able to take over the castle. So if you're a new player and you're worried about like too much of the PvP stuff, don't be, honestly, at least on the non-server reset servers, because yeah, it costs a lot of resource to take a castle, so it's not something that someone will just do unless they're going to get a pretty significant benefit out of it. So if there's like a huge castle with clearly like a ton of resources in, then it's something you go after. But if you're just like kind of want to mess around with the game at like a lower level or a more casual pace, then it's not something you need to worry about a ton. Also, there's PvE servers, so if you just don't want to engage with the PvP, that's another way to do it. But I do really like PvP in general. Also in games like this, I think it's really fun. I guess the only other thing to mention is like the way it works is that the different servers have different like caps for squads. So when you join a server, you'll be able to make parties, and those people will essentially be your allies throughout the whole of the journey. And there's some where it's like recommended 3 to 4, so you can have a maximum of a four vampire squad. And there's other like duo servers as well, so that's 1 to 2. So far, I've only tried the duos. I gotta say, the four squad one does seem kind of fun and enticing, but I'll need to find more people to play it with at that point. But yeah, if you're interested in this game, if you've seen it about and you're unsure of whether to play it, generally speaking, I would say if you're into like skill-based, ability-based PvP games with a heavy chunk of like RPG and progression style stuff, definitely give this a look. There's really so much you can do with the castle building as well, like all the different production machines, all the different workbenches benefit from different types of flooring, so you can really organize your castle in like a variety of different ways. There's, you can build like gardens to help harvest like certain types of crops. There's just really wild ideas as well that I really like. Like, I don't want to spoil too many of these, but there's just some really cool things in it. Like in your garden, you can have tombs, and you essentially give the tomb, you input a type of flower, and then that type of flower allows ghouls to grow from your tombs. So there's like enemies in your own back garden that you can go and kill, and then they drop like grave dust, which is a pretty annoying resource to gather in general, and it's used throughout most of the games. So that's like a really thematic, really cool way to include a type of grinding that you can do in your own castle, right? There's also other just really tiny little touches that work super well. So like, I know vampires have a thing about OCD, or at least so I've heard. I didn't even know this, but basically, when you click on a storage container, say it's got like a bunch of iron, copper, and stone in, you can click on compulsively count on your vampire, and it will transfer all of the same types of resources from your dude into the chest, which is just like, it's a nice little thematic touch, that adds a little bit of flavor to the to the whole thing, really. So yeah, if this sounds up your alley, chances are you're probably going to really enjoy it. It's a pretty heavy time investment, I'll say. Like, I think I have like, I don't know, maybe 22 hours in the game, and like I said, I'm only really at the kind of like mid to late point, so there's still definitely like a solid 30 hours of content, I would say, based on what's there right now. Again, I think from what I understand, there's 2 more zones they're going to add. So there's at least like 30 hours right now, and this is the kind of game that will have server resets, so you'll be competing, if you get really into it with like a squad, you'll be competing on each server reset to try and race to win the server, essentially, by the end of it. So yeah, it's a really cool game. I could see a lot of people sinking a ton of time into it. I certainly will be. It looks fantastic as well. I haven't really mentioned that, but it's not like the most graphically impressive game in the world, but it just, everything, all of the like castle structures look incredibly gothic and just really cool. Like the throne design is great as well. There's just a lot of nice little visual touches that you will enjoy for sure if you're into that kind of like gothic aesthetic, I suppose. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say. There's a lot of other like systems and nuances, but I mean, honestly, they're all best just kind of like explored. I've given you the general idea of how things go. So yeah, give it a shot. It's not the most expensive game in the world. It's super fun and very popular at the minute. So it's a online game in which you'll actually be able to, play it with a lot of other people. It won't be like dead or anything, at least not anytime soon, I don't think. So yeah, go give it a shot. It's really good. Cheers for listening. I hope you all have a good day, and peace out, everybody.